Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Mr. Mughal, how are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Right. We meet in the town hall today for a special meeting. You know, I've always been intrigued about the contribution of Northwest Bangladeshis as well as the Pakistanis here, because at once it was East Pakistan and West Pakistan all living together. But come 71, there was a revolution, and I believe you've witnessed it, I witnessed it, and you've been either an active or a passive observer looking at all the things. So
Yes.
what's your reflection in terms of what's happened in 71?
I think it was inevitable because I was in Manchester in the late 60s and we knew things were really not good in East Pakistan as it was then. The army of predominantly West Pakistan cracked down on the civilians of East Pakistan to such a level that there were many atrocities committed, many people were killed, and that was simply because people in East Pakistan wanted autonomy. Autonomy in the sense that if you look at what the state was at that time, all the government departments were in West Pakistan. Not a single department was in East Pakistan. So which meant that all the federal jobs, all the good paid jobs were in West Pakistan. None of them was in East Pakistan. So when the East Pakistanis wanted self-control, if you like, that was the first demand, that they wanted to have more resources, more ways of dealing with things themselves, because remember, they were in the majority. The majority of the population of Pakistan lived in East Pakistan. And because of the military government of the time, Ayub Khan and then Yahya Khan denied the people their basic rights. There was the demand of, first of all, self-governance, and inevitably when that is not delivered, then the demand came for independence. So as I see it, I think it's a logical development. If you don't give people what they basically want, their demands will go higher and higher. Eventually, they will ask for independence. And if you don't give them independence, then they will fight for it.
Well, that's a very kind of constructive way of telling the history, Mr. Mughal. But do you think there had been an election in 71, and
Yes.
democratically, Sheikh
Yes.
Mujibur Rahman won the election outright, both in the West Wing as well as in the East Wing. So what happened then? What do you think of that?
Well, one of the problems was because you had East and West, Mujib won the elections in East Pakistan overwhelmingly. In West, it was the Pakistan People's Party that won the elections. So really, there was no one political party that could claim that they had won the election throughout the country. So there was that issue. But if you follow the democratic principles and the Mujib party won the elections, then it was incumbent on the generals of the day to hand over power to Sheikh Mujib. And they refused to do that because I think one of the major demands of Sheikh Mujib was, at that time, when they were not given any self-governance, if you like, was that the East would not fund the armed forces bills because the army was from the West. Why should people in the East fund the army which is on the West? And I think that was a stumbling block which the generals did not like, and I believe that was the point where the generals decided not to hand over political power to the elected government.
You bring different reflections, of course, after 50 years. One question people often ask is that the relationship between the West and the East still remains very sour. And what do you think, having had the East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh and the 50 years of independence, do you think there should be some form of redress by the West? For example, apology for what's happened, some redress about the people Urdu-speaking people in there and the Bengali-speaking in the West still remains. And the asset, do you think those things could actually form better relationship between the two countries?
I think if you're looking at better relations, then they have to come from the people-to-people relationships. When Pakistan was created, the only link between the East and the West was Islam, the Muslim philosophy that the Muslims could not live with the Hindus because there was two-nation theory which was propagated and people accepted that. And so really once you had that, also remember the West imposed the national language to be Urdu when nobody in East Pakistan spoke Urdu. They were Bengali speakers. So in actual fact, the majority language was Bengali. If anything, the language should have been Bengali. But many students like myself, we did not support that. What we said was because if the bond between the East and West was Islam, then really the national language should be Arabic. We should be teaching Arabic to all our children, and then they will have a better understanding of their own. So I don't think anything is going to develop on that scale. That is why I was saying that really we need to concentrate on people-to-people relationships, and hopefully that will actually develop into state-to-state relationships as well.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. Mughal, for your insight. And I think your last comments are very fair, and I think if we all can relate to one another and make those bridges, then perhaps the states can actually rise up to the same.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Just put a stop to that. Stop. Well, thank you, Mr. Mughal, for your reflection over the 50 years of independence of Bangladesh and education of Bangladesh. My final question to you is this. How do you see the two countries moving forward in terms of building relationships? Because there are animosities, and I think apology is very important. That must happen, and the rest could follow up. So what is your view on that?
I think the issue of the apology is very sensitive, not only in the context of the Indian subcontinent, but everywhere else in the world, wherever there have been colonial rule and people have actually become independent, and many countries have been asking for apologies and reparations. The apology on its own is not enough. It has got to be followed up by reparations. I think this is what people are afraid of. And if a country apologizes, then there are consequences of that. And the consequences of that are to make reparations for the damage done. But I think in cases of Bangladesh and Pakistan, the future has got to be people-to-people contacts, and really to let the NGOs do a lot of work amongst each other and build up that confidence, so that there comes a time when the states are able to say, yeah, bygones are bygones, a lot of mistakes were done, but remember, those mistakes were done largely by the armed forces. Those are the generals who did that, not the civilian government. So the civilian government in a way is saying, why blame us? Because the generals did it. So I think we need to be a bit more mature on that one and say, look, this is not the right time to ask for an apology, because apology has got other consequences with it. Let us work together as people to people and build up other relations like cultural relations and sporting relations and so on, so that there comes a time when the new generations from both countries are able to sit down and say, look, we can actually work together now as, and if we're working together, become a major economic and political force in South Asia.
Thank you very much. Thank you.